The alarm system on the research vessel made a strange sound. Tae-young lifted his head from the microscope and listened. He had been studying cell samples from the new planet below for 6 hours straight. His eyes hurt and his back was sore, but the sound made him forget all of that. Something was out there. He walked quickly to the main console and pulled up the sensor readings. His heart started beating faster. There was a ship. An unknown ship. It was drifting about 2,000 meters from their position, barely moving, showing no power signature except for a weak energy pulse deep inside. Tae-young looked around the lab. He was alone. The rest of the crew was either sleeping or working in other sections of the horizon's edge. He should report this immediately. That was the protocol. But something made him hesitate. If he reported now, Captain Daehyun would send a full team. There would be procedures, documentation, waiting. Tae-young had spent his whole career waiting for a moment like this. He made a decision that would change everything. 20 minutes later, Tae-young was inside the alien craft. His suit lights cut through the darkness as he moved carefully through the corridors. The ship was small, maybe designed for 3 or 4 crew members. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. The air inside was thin, but breathable according to his suit sensors. The walls had a strange texture, almost organic, like they had been grown rather than built. He found her in the 3rd chamber. The room was circular with a raised platform in the center. On that platform was a pod made of transparent material that glowed with a soft blue light. Inside the pod was a woman. At least she looked like a woman. Tae-young stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that seemed impossible. Her skin had a pale quality to it, almost luminescent. There were markings along her arms and neck, patterns that seemed to shimmer even though she was completely still. Her hair was long and dark, floating slightly in the preservation fluid inside the pod. She wore a simple suit that looked like it was made from the same material as the ship walls. Tae-young circled the pod slowly, studying every detail. He had seen many strange things in his 7 years as xenobiologist, but never anything like this. She looked almost human, but the markings, the way her features were just slightly different. The extra joint in her fingers, these things marked her as alien. He was reaching for his scanner when the pod made a sound. A low humming filled the chamber. The blue light grew brighter. Tae-young jumped back, his hand going to the communication device on his belt. He should call for help. He should leave immediately. But he stood frozen, watching as the humming grew louder and the light pulsed faster. The pod was opening. The transparent cover slid back with a soft hiss. The fluid inside drained away through hidden channels. The woman's eyes moved beneath her closed eyelids. Her chest rose and fell with her first breath in who knew how many years. The markings on her skin began to glow with a soft golden light. Then her eyes opened. They were unlike any eyes Tae-young had ever seen. Large and dark, with flecks of gold that seemed to swirl in the iris. She looked at him with confusion and fear. She tried to stand up, but her muscles wouldn't respond properly. She made a sound, words in a language Tae-young couldn't understand. He held up his hands, palms out, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "It's okay," he said softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. "I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him, her breathing quick and shallow. She tried to speak again, but her voice was weak. Her hand reached out and gripped the edge of the pod as she tried to pull herself up. Tae-young moved forward instinctively to help her, but she flinched back. "Please," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Let me help you." Something in his tone must have reached her because she stopped pulling away. Tae-young carefully supported her arm as she sat up. Her skin was cool to the touch, and he could feel a faint vibration, like electricity running just beneath the surface. The markings on her arm glowed brighter where he touched her. She looked around the chamber, her expression growing more distressed. She spoke rapidly in her language, questions that Taeyang wished desperately he could answer. Tears formed in her strange eyes. Taeyang pulled the universal translator from his belt. It was basic technology, not designed for a completely unknown language, but it might help. He activated it, and the device began recording her speech, analyzing patterns, searching its massive database for any similarities. The woman noticed the device and stopped talking. She looked at it, then at Taeyang, then back at the device. She seemed to understand what it was because she spoke more slowly, enunciating carefully. "Where am I?" The translator's synthesized voice said after a moment. "What year is this? Where is my crew?" Taeyang took a breath. "You're on a research vessel. Human research vessel. The year is 2247 by our calendar. Your crew? I don't know. Your ship was drifting. You were alone." The woman's face went pale. She looked down at her hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. The glow in her markings dimmed. "How long?" she whispered. "How long was I in stasis?" "I don't know," Taeyang admitted. "But your ship is very old. The technology is far beyond ours, but it's been drifting for a long time." She closed her eyes and more tears fell. Taeyang felt a deep ache in his chest watching her. Whatever had happened to this woman, wherever she came from, she was alone and afraid and far from home. "My name is Taeyang," he said gently. "What's your name?" She opened her eyes and looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, the translator rendered her words as Nari. She pointed to herself. "I am Nari. I am Luminari." She gestured around the chamber. "This is my punishment. My prison." Before Taeyang could ask what she meant, Nari's eyes rolled back and she collapsed. He caught her before she hit the floor of the pod, her body going limp in his arms. The markings on her skin flickered weakly. Taeyang hit his communication device. "Medical emergency," he said quickly. "This is Taeyang. I need immediate assistance. I have a survivor from an unknown alien vessel. She's unconscious, and I don't know her biology. Please respond." As he waited for the response, holding Nari carefully, he noticed something clutched in her other hand. A small crystal data storage device, pulsing with the same weak light as the ship around them. He carefully took it, slipping it into his suit pocket just as he heard running footsteps approaching from outside the alien craft. Everything was about to change. He looked down at Nari's peaceful face and wondered who she really was and what secrets that crystal might hold. 3 weeks had passed since Taeyang found Nari in the drifting alien ship. 3 weeks of medical tests, interviews, and constant monitoring. Captain Daehyun had been furious when he learned what Taeyang had done, boarding an unknown vessel alone without reporting it first. But the anger had faded when they realized what they had found. First contact with an alien species. A living, breathing alien who could communicate with them. Nari had recovered quickly once the medical team understood her basic biology. Her body chemistry was similar enough to humans that they could help her, different enough to be fascinating. She ate their food, breathed their air, and slowly learned their language. The neural interface technology helped with that. A small device attached to her temple that connected her brain to the ship's language database. Within days, she was speaking basic English. Within 2 weeks, she was having real conversations. Her voice was soft and had a musical quality that made even simple words sound beautiful. Taeyang had spent most of those 3 weeks with her. It was his job, he told himself. He had found her. He was the Zan biologist. He needed to study her species and culture. But the truth was deeper than that. He liked being around her. She was intelligent and curious, asking endless questions about humans and Earth and everything they had built. "Why do you travel to the stars?" she asked him one day in the medical bay. "To explore," Tae-young said. "To learn. To find others like you. Are you lonely?" Nari asked, tilting her head. "Is that why humans search the darkness for friends?" The question caught him off guard. "Maybe," he admitted. "Maybe we just want to know we're not alone in the universe." Nari smiled sadly. "You are not alone. The universe is full of life. But being full of life and being full of friends are different things." She was kept in the medical bay most of the time, but Captain Dae-hyun finally agreed to let her have supervised visits to other parts of the ship. She needed to walk, to move, to see more than white walls and medical equipment. The captain assigned a security officer to escort her, a young woman named Hae-jin who worked in engineering. On the 22nd day, Hae-jin was walking with Nari through the residential section of the ship. They were talking about human families and how humans raise their children. Nari was fascinated by the concept of schools and teachers. They passed Tae-young's quarters. The door was slightly open. He had left in a hurry that morning, called to an emergency meeting about their research findings. Nari noticed the opening and stopped walking. "Is that Tae-young's room?" she asked. Hae-jin looked at the door and nodded. "Yes, but we should keep moving. He's not there right now." But Nari was staring at the open door with an odd expression. "I see something," she said quietly. "On his desk." "I see. I need to look." Hae-jin hesitated. This wasn't protocol. But Nari had been so cooperative, so patient with all their tests and questions. "Just for a moment," Hae-jin said. "Don't touch anything." Nari stepped into the small room. It was neat and organized, like Tae-young himself. Books lined one wall, actual physical books which were rare in 2247. His desk held a computer terminal, several datapads, and various objects that must have been meaningful to him. A rock from some planet, a dried flower pressed under glass, and there, in a simple frame, a photograph. Nari walked to the desk as if in a dream. She stared at the photograph, and her markings began to glow brightly, something that happened when she felt strong emotions. Hae-jin stepped closer, concerned. "Nari? What's wrong?" Nari didn't answer. She reached out and picked up the frame with shaking hands. The photograph was old, faded, and appeared to be an archaeological artifact. It showed a woman standing among a group of humans. The humans wore simple clothing made from animal skins. They stood in front of crude shelters. The landscape behind them looked ancient and untamed, but it was the woman in the center of the image that held Nari's attention. She had pale skin with glowing markings, dark hair, features that were almost human, but not quite. She was smiling, her hand resting on the shoulder of a human child. The woman in the photograph looked exactly like Nari. "This is not possible," Nari whispered. "This is not possible." That was when Tae-young arrived. He had finished his meeting early and returned to his quarters to grab some notes. He stopped in the doorway, seeing Nari holding the photograph, her whole body shaking. "Nari?" he said carefully. "Are you okay?" She turned to face him. Her eyes were wide with shock and confusion. Tears ran down her cheeks, glowing faintly gold as they fell. "Why is my picture in your room?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you have this? Where did you get this?" Tae-young looked at Hae-jin, who seemed just as confused as he felt. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him for privacy. "That's not your picture," he said gently. "That photograph is over 12,000 years old. It was found at an archaeological site on Earth." "No," Nari said, looking back at the image. "No, you are wrong. This is me. I remember this. I remember these people. I remember." She touched the glass over the photograph, her finger tracing the faces of the humans standing with her. I remember the child. Her name was... I cannot remember her name, but I remember her smile. Tae-young felt cold. He had owned a copy of this photograph since his university days. It was one of the great mysteries of Zen archaeology, an image that seemed to show an alien among ancient humans. Most scientists dismissed it as a hoax or a trick of light and shadow, but Tae-young had believed it was real. He had built his entire career on the belief that humans had encountered aliens in Earth's distant past. "That's impossible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You would have to be thousands of years old." "I was in stasis," Nari said. "But before the stasis, before my punishment, I was sent to observe developing civilizations. We were called observers. We watched and recorded, but never interfered. That was the law. The most important law." She looked at him with desperate eyes. "Where was this found? What location on Earth?" "Korea," Tae-young said. "An ancient settlement in the mountains of the Korean peninsula. I studied this site in university. I wrote my thesis on it." Nari closed her eyes. More tears fell. "I broke the law," she whispered. "There was going to be a flood. A terrible flood. I saw it coming, and I knew those people would die. All of them. The children. I could not let it happen. So I warned them. I helped them move to higher ground. I saved them, and they punished you for saving lives?" Hae-jin asked, anger in her voice. "The law was absolute," Nari said. "Observers do not interfere. We document. We record. We let nature take its course. But I could not do it. I could not watch them die when I had the knowledge to save them." She opened her eyes and looked at Tae-young. "My people found out what I did. They put me in stasis as punishment. They said I would sleep until I learned the value of non-interference. They said someone would wake me when my sentence was complete." "How long was your sentence?" Tae-young asked quietly. 500 years, Nari said. "I was supposed to sleep for 500 years. The room was silent. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Nari had slept not for 500 years, but for over 12,000. Something had gone terribly wrong. Nari's legs gave out and she sat down hard on Tae-young's bed, still clutching the photograph. "Where are they?" she asked. "Where are my people? Why did no one come for me? Why did I drift in darkness for so long?" Tae-young knelt in front of her, his hands hovering near hers, but not quite touching. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But we're going to find out. The data crystal you had, we've been analyzing it. Maybe it has answers." Nari looked at him with such sadness that his heart ached. "You kept this photograph all these years." "Why?" Tae-young swallowed hard. "Because it gave me hope. Hope that we weren't alone. Hope that somewhere out there, someone else was looking at the stars and wondering about us. This picture is the reason I became a xenobiologist. The reason I'm out here. And now you have found me," Nari said softly. "The woman in the picture. But I am not Hope. I am a failure who broke the most sacred law of my people." "You saved lives," Tae-young said firmly. "You chose compassion over rules. That's not failure." Nari looked at him for a long moment, then down at the photograph in her hands. She traced the image of herself standing with those ancient humans one more time. "I do not know if they would agree with you," she said, "but I thank you for saying it." Hae-jin's communication device beeped. "I need to report this," she said reluctantly. "Captain Dae-hyun needs to know." Nari nodded. She carefully placed the photograph back on Tae-young's desk. As she did, her hand brushed against his, and their eyes met. In that moment, Tae-young saw not an alien specimen to study, but a person who had lost everything and everyone she had ever known. "We will help you," he promised. "Whatever happened to your people, whatever the truth is, we will find it together." Nari wanted to believe him. She could see the sincerity in his eyes. But she had been asleep for 12,000 years, and the universe had moved on without her. What truths would they find? And would she be strong enough to face them? The conference room was cold and silent. Captain Daehyun sat at the head of the long table, his face unreadable. Taeyoung stood near the wall, watching Nari carefully. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her markings barely glowing. She looked smaller than usual, fragile in a way she hadn't before. G-Wu, the ship's historian and cultural specialist, was setting up a holographic display. She had spent the last 2 days analyzing the data crystal that Nari had carried with her. Her hand shook slightly as she worked. Whatever she had found, it had shaken her. "Are you ready to begin?" Captain Daehyun asked Nari. She nodded slowly. "I am ready, but I do not know if I am ready for the truth." "Truth is truth," the captain said. "Whether we are ready for it or not, it exists." Ji-Woo activated the display. A 3-dimensional map appeared in the air above the table. Stars and planets glowed in miniature, slowly rotating. "This is the data from Nari's crystal," she explained. "It contains star charts, navigation routes, and what appears to be a complete database of luminary culture and history." Nari leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the map. "I recognize this," she whispered. "This is the local cluster. This is where we lived." Ji-Woo zoomed in on one particular star system. A large yellow sun with 7 planets orbiting it. The 3rd planet glowed brighter than the others. "This was your homeworld?" "Yes," Nari said. "That is Lumina. That is home." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. It was beautiful. Blue oceans and green continents. Cities of light that could be seen from space. Music everywhere. Always music. "Nari," Ji-Woo said gently, "I need you to understand something before I show you the rest. The data on this crystal is over 12,000 years old. It shows your civilization as it was when you left it." "I understand," Nari said. "I have been gone a long time." Ji-Woo looked at Captain Daehyun, who nodded. She pressed another control and the display changed. Now it showed current data, information gathered from the horizon's edge long-range sensors. The same star system appeared, but everything was different. The star was gone. In its place was an expanding cloud of gas and debris, the remnants of a supernova. The planets were destroyed, scattered as asteroids and dust. Where Lumina had been, there was nothing but silence and darkness. Nari made a sound, a sharp intake of breath that was almost a scream. Her markings flared bright gold, then dimmed to almost nothing. "No," she said. "No, that is wrong. Your sensors are wrong." "I'm sorry," Ji-Woo said, and she genuinely was. Tears were in her eyes. "We checked 3 times. We sent probes. This happened approximately 8,000 years ago. Your sun went supernova. Everything was destroyed." Nari stood up so fast her chair fell backward. She walked to the display, her hand reaching out as if she could touch the ghost of her world. "Everyone?" she asked. "Everyone is gone?" "We found no signs of life," Ji-Woo said. "No cities, no ships, no signals. If anyone survived, they are not in that system anymore." "They would have known," Nari said, her voice breaking. "Stars do not suddenly explode. There are warning signs. My people were advanced. They would have seen it coming. They would have evacuated." Taeyoung stepped forward. "Then maybe they did. Maybe they left and went somewhere else. The galaxy is huge. They could be anywhere." Nari turned to him with wild eyes. "Then, why did they leave me? Why did they not take my ship? I was in stasis, helpless, and they left me to drift in the darkness for thousands of years." She pressed her hands to her chest. "Did they forget me? Did they abandon me on purpose?" No one had an answer for that. The silence in the room was heavy and terrible. Captain Dahine cleared his throat. There is another possibility. They may have tried to retrieve you, but could not find you. Space is vast. Your ship was damaged and drifting. Perhaps you moved too far from the evacuation routes. Or perhaps, Nari said bitterly, they decided that one criminal was not worth saving. Perhaps they thought I deserved to be left behind. You don't believe that, Taeyang said firmly. I do not know what I believe anymore, Nari said. She looked at the holographic display of her destroyed homeworld, and something seemed to break inside her. She collapsed to her knees, her whole body shaking with sobs. The sound was heartbreaking, full of a grief so deep it seemed to fill the entire room. Taeyang moved without thinking. He knelt beside her and put his arms around her. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned and buried her face against his shoulder, crying like she would never stop. Her tears were warm and glowed faintly where they soaked into his uniform. Ji-woo wiped her own eyes. Captain Dahine looked away, giving them what privacy he could in the moment. Even he, stern and disciplined, seemed affected by the depth of Nari's loss. I am the last, Nari said between sobs. The last Luminari. Everything I knew, everyone I loved, all of it is dust and memory. I am alone. Completely alone. You're not alone, Taeyang said quietly. We're here. Nari pulled back and looked at him. Her face was wet with glowing tears, her eyes red and swollen. You are not my people. No, Taeyang agreed. But we're people. And we care about what happens to you. She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Whatever she saw there seemed to comfort her slightly. She took a shaking breath and tried to compose herself. Captain Dahine spoke carefully. Nari, I know this is difficult, but we need to understand more about your situation. The data crystal contains other information. Historical records, cultural files, and what appears to be legal documents related to your case. Nari wiped her eyes and nodded. Show me. Ji-woo brought up a new file. Text appeared in the air, written in Luminari script. The universal translator worked slowly to convert it to English. This is the record of your trial, Ji-woo explained. It describes your crime and your sentence. Nari read it aloud, her voice flat and emotionless now. Observer Nari of the 3rd Expedition is found guilty of violating the Prime Directive of Non-Interference. She did willfully warn a primitive species of impending natural disaster, directly altering their timeline and survival rate. As punishment, she is sentenced to 500 years of temporal stasis, to be served aboard her observation vessel. Upon completion of sentence, she will be retrieved and reassigned to non-observation duties. 500 years, Taeyang said. But you slept for 12,000. Something went wrong, Nari said. My ship must have been damaged. The retrieval beacon must have failed. And then, she gestured to the image of the destroyed star system. Then there was no one left to retrieve me. Ji-woo scrolled through more data. There's something else here. Medical records. Nari, how old were you when they put you in stasis? By your years? Perhaps 300. I was young for a Luminari. And your natural lifespan? We lived long lives. 2,000 years was not uncommon if we were healthy. Ji-woo's face brightened slightly. Then there's good news in all this darkness. According to the medical data, the stasis preserved you perfectly. You haven't aged. Biologically, you're still the same age you were when you entered the pod. You could live for another 1,700 years. Nari laughed, but there was no humor in it. 1,700 years of being the last of my kind. Wonderful. Or 1,700 years of building something new, Taeyang said. Of sharing your culture with us. Of making sure the Luminari are remembered. Museums and history books, Nari said. That is what I am now. An artifact. A curiosity. You're a person, Taeyang insisted. You're Nari. And yes, you're the last Luminari. But that doesn't mean your life is over. It means you get to decide what your legacy will be. Captain Daehyun leaned forward. Nari, you asked to see Earth, the place where you once lived among humans. I think that request is even more important now. Would you still like to go? Nari looked at him, then at Taeyang, then back at the holographic display showing her dead world. Yes, she said quietly. I want to see if anything I did mattered. I want to know if saving those humans meant something, or if I threw away everything for nothing. It meant something, Taeyang said with certainty. Those people survived because of you. They had children, and those children had children, and on for 12,000 years. You saved entire bloodlines. Perhaps, Nari said. But I also lost everything. My freedom, my people, my world. Was it a fair trade? No one could answer that question. It was something Nari would have to decide for herself. Captain Daehyun stood. I will set course for Earth immediately. We should arrive in approximately 10 days. In the meantime, Nari, you are welcome to continue accessing the database. Learn what you can about what happened to your people. Maybe there are clues we've missed. Nari nodded. She stood slowly, with Taeyang's help. Her legs were unsteady, but she managed. Thank you, Captain. And I'm sorry for being difficult. You just learned your entire civilization is gone, the captain said gruffly. I think you're entitled to be difficult. As they left the conference room, Taeyang walked beside Nari. She was quiet, lost in her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. That photograph in your room. May I have a copy? Of course, Taeyang said. Why? Because it is proof, Nari said. Proof that I existed before all of this. Proof that I once had purpose. And proof that at least once in my life, I chose to care about others more than I cared about rules. She looked at him. I think I need to remember that. I think I need to hold on to it. I'll get you the copy, Taeyang promised. And Nari? The journey to Earth took 10 days, but for Nari, it felt like both an eternity and an instant. She spent most of her time in Taeyang's quarters, which had become an unofficial sanctuary for her. He had offered to share the space after finding her one night curled up in a corner of the medical bay, unable to sleep surrounded by all those white walls and machines. They would sit together for hours. Taeyang showed her everything he could about humanity. Music from 1,000 different cultures. Art that ranged from ancient cave paintings to holographic sculptures. Literature that spanned millennia. He wanted her to understand what humans had become in the 12,000 years since she had known them. You knew us when we were barely surviving, he said one evening. Small tribes fighting nature for every meal, every day. Look at us now. He pulled up images of Earth, gleaming cities that stretched into the clouds. Orbital stations circling the planet like jewels. Ships departing for distant stars, carrying humans to worlds Nari's people had only dreamed of reaching. You did this, Nari said softly, in only 12,000 years. My people took 50,000 years to achieve spaceflight. You are so fast, so driven. We're stubborn, Taeyang said with a smile. We don't like being told we can't do something. Nari smiled back, but it faded quickly. I wonder what my people would think of you. If they could see you now, what do you think they would think? She was quiet for a moment. I think they would be surprised, maybe a little afraid. You grow so quickly, change so rapidly. It is like watching a star be born. Beautiful but dangerous. Those nights, Nari also shared her memories with him. She would close her eyes and describe Lumana. The crystal towers that caught the light and scattered it in rainbows. The gardens that grew without soil, floating in the air through magnetic fields. The music that was everywhere, played not by instruments, but by the very architecture of their cities. We believed in harmony, she said. Everything should work together. Nature and technology. Individual and society. We spent thousands of years perfecting that balance. It sounds beautiful, Taeyang said. It was, Nari agreed. But it was also rigid. There were so many rules about maintaining the harmony. So many things you could not do because they might disturb the balance. She looked at her hands. I disturbed the balance. I put individual lives above the collective principle. That was my crime. Your people were wrong, Taeyang said firmly. Life is more important than principles. Is it? Nari asked. Principles last forever. Life is temporary. But without life, who is left to care about principles? Nari had no answer for that. Other crew members visited too. Hyjin from engineering brought devices she had built, hoping to recover more data from Nari's ship. Sangwoo from medical came to check on Nari's health and to bring her supplements tailored to her biology. Ji-woo brought historical records, showing Nari what had become of the site where she had saved those ancient humans. The area is now part of a protected historical zone, Ji-woo explained. The settlement you saved became the foundation for a thriving culture. Their descendants spread throughout the region. In a way, you didn't just save a few dozen people. You saved thousands of future generations. Nari absorbed this information quietly. It helped, a little, to know that her choice had mattered. But it didn't erase the loss of everything else. On the 8th day of their journey, Nari woke up screaming. Taeyang, who had been sleeping in a chair nearby, jolted awake. Nari was sitting up in the bed, her markings blazing bright gold, her hands clutching her head. She was speaking rapidly in Luminari, words that the translator couldn't process because they were coming too fast. Nari. Taeyang grabbed her shoulders gently. Nari, you're safe. You're on the horizon's edge. You're safe. She focused on his face gradually, her breathing slowing. The glow in her markings dimmed. I dreamed, she whispered. I dreamed I was back in the stasis pod. But this time, I could see out. I watched as my star died. I watched it expand and consume everything. And I could not move. I could only watch. It was just a dream, Taeyang said. It's over now, is it? Nari asked. Or am I still in that pod, and all of this is the dream? How do I know what is real anymore? Taeyang took her hand and placed it against his chest, over his heart. Feel that? That's real. I'm real. This moment is real. Nari's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Sometimes I wish I had never woken up. At least in stasis, I still had hope. I still believed my people would come for me. Would you really choose ignorance over truth? Yes, Nari said immediately. Then, quieter. No, I do not know. Is it wrong to want to not hurt anymore? No, Taeyang said. It's human. And maybe it's Luminari too. Pain is universal. They arrived at Earth on the 10th day. Nari stood at the observation window, staring at the blue and green planet that filled the view. It looked so different from her memories. There were lights everywhere, marking cities and settlements. Orbital platforms and satellites created a glittering net around the planet. So many humans, she whispered. When I knew you, there were so few. Millions, perhaps, scattered across the continents. Now, nearly 20 billion, Taeyang said. On Earth and the colonies combined. 20 billion, Nari repeated. And I saved perhaps 50. Such a small number. Yet, they became this. She pressed her hand against the window. I do not understand you. How you multiply so fast. How you spread so far. How you survive. We're good at surviving, Taeyang said. It's what we do best. Captain Dahyon's voice came over the communication system. "We are being hailed by Earth Defense. They want to know about our passenger." "What did you tell them?" Tae-young asked. "The truth. That we have first contact with an alien species. They want her brought to Geneva, to the United Earth Council." Nari turned from the window, her expression neutral. "I am to be judged again. By a different species this time." "Not judged," Tae-young protested. "They just want to meet you. To understand. To decide what to do with me," Nari corrected. "I am a problem that needs a solution. An alien with nowhere to go and no people to return to. They must decide if I'm valuable or dangerous or simply inconvenient." She wasn't wrong, and Tae-young knew it. The United Earth Council would make decisions about Nari's future. Whether she would be free or confined. Whether she would be studied or protected. Whether she would be seen as a person or a resource. The descent to Earth took hours. Nari sat silently, watching the planet grow larger. When they landed at the Geneva spaceport, she was met by security officers who were professional but wary. They escorted her to a waiting vehicle with Tae-young, Captain Daehyun, and G-Woo-dot. The council building was impressive, all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky. Inside, they were taken to a large chamber where representatives from every Earth nation and colony waited. Hundreds of people, all staring at Nari as she entered. She walked with her head high, her markings glowing steady and calm. She wore a simple white suit that Hyjin had made for her, designed to accommodate her unique physiology. She looked small in that vast room, but not weak. The council chairperson, a stern woman named Park Min-seo, called the session to order. "We are here to discuss the status of Nari, last known survivor of the Luminari civilization. Various proposals have been submitted regarding her future. We will hear arguments for each." The arguments went on for hours. Some representatives wanted Nari placed in protective custody for study. She represents an advanced civilization. We could learn so much from her. Others wanted her contained for security reasons. We don't know if there are more Luminari out there. She could be a scout, an advanced observer. Some wanted her given full rights and freedom. She's a refugee stranded in time. We have a moral obligation to help her. Through it all, Nari sat silent, her face expressionless. Tae-young watched her and felt anger building. They were talking about her like she was an object, a thing to be categorized and filed away. Finally, Chairperson Park spoke directly to Nari. "You have been silent. Do you have anything to say?" Nari stood slowly, every eye in the room fixed on her. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "I did not ask to be here. I did not ask to wake up in a future where everything I knew is gone. But I am here, and I am awake, and I am trying to understand what that means." She paused, gathering her thoughts. 12,000 years ago, I broke the most sacred law of my people. I interfered with a developing species because I could not watch them die. I was punished for that choice. I lost my freedom, my career, my life. But standing here now, looking at what you have become, I cannot say I regret it. She gestured around the room. You argue about what to do with me. Study me. Contain me. Free me. But I am not asking for anything except one thing. Let me go to the place where I once walked among your ancestors. Let me see if any memory of that time remains. Then I will answer whatever questions you have. Then I will accept whatever decision you make. The room was silent. Then Tae-young stood. I will testify on her behalf. That is not necessary, Nari said quietly. Yes, it is. Tae-young faced the council. I found Nari. I've spent every day with her since. She's not a threat. She's not a resource. She is a person who has lost everything and is trying to find some meaning in what's left. How we treat. The mountains of Korea looked different than Nari remembered, but somehow the same. The peaks still reached toward the sky. The valleys still held morning mist. The air still smelled of pine and earth. But where there had once been only wilderness, there were now paths and markers and protective barriers around the archaeological site. Nari stood at the edge of the dig site, her eyes closed, breathing deeply. Taeyong watched her from a few steps away. Behind them, Jae-won and 2 other security officers waited quietly. Ji-woo was there too, carrying scanning equipment and historical records. "It feels like yesterday," Nari said softly. "It feels like another lifetime." Both things are true. She opened her eyes and walked forward. The site had been excavated carefully over the years. Foundations of ancient shelters were visible, marked with tags and information plaques. But Nari didn't look at those. She walked to a specific spot, a flat area near the base of a cliff. "This is where they lived," she said. 47 people. I counted them. 23 adults, 19 children, 5 elders. They had been in this valley for 3 generations. "How did you know about the flood?" Ji-woo asked, her recorder capturing everything. "We had orbital scans. We could see the weather patterns forming. A massive storm system building to the north. It would bring rain for days, and the river would overflow. This whole valley would be underwater." Nari pointed to the high ground beyond the cliff. "I told them to move there. They did not understand at first. I had to show them to make them believe." "The historical records mention a great flood story," Ji-woo said, "passed down through generations. They said a Lightbringer warned them and saved the tribe." Nari's markings glowed brighter. "Lightbringer, yes, they called me that because of these." She touched the glowing patterns on her arm. "They thought I was a spirit. I tried to explain I was just a visitor, but the language barrier was too great." "Did you have the translator technology then?" Taeyong asked. "No, we were observers only. We watched and recorded. We were not supposed to communicate." Nari walked along the edge of the dig site. "But I watched them for months. I learned their language. I saw how they cared for each other, how they laughed and sang and loved. They were not primitive. They were people." She stopped at what appeared to be the entrance to a cave. "May I go in?" Ji-woo checked with the security team. Jae-won nodded. "I'll go with you." The cave was deeper than it looked from outside. The walls were rough stone, but as they moved further in, Taeyong's flashlight caught something. Marks on the wall. No, not just marks. Paintings.nar. I made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She rushed forward, her own markings providing light. The paintings covered the cave walls in a riot of color made from natural pigments. They showed a figure with glowing skin standing among normal humans. The figure pointed to the sky where dark clouds gathered. The figure led the people to high ground. The people survived. "They remembered," Nari whispered. "They remembered me." But there was more. Further into the cave, the paintings became more detailed. They showed the glowing figure teaching the humans how to make better tools, how to preserve food, how to predict weather by reading the sky. In the final painting, the glowing figure was leaving, and the humans were reaching out to her with expressions of sadness. "You did more than just warn them about the flood," Taeyong said. "I could not help it," Nari said. "Once I broke the law once, it became easier to break it again. I spent 3 months with them before my people found out what I had done. I taught them everything I could. I wanted them to survive, to thrive." Ji-woo was scanning the paintings carefully. "Nari, do you know what this means? These aren't just paintings. They're lessons. Encoded knowledge. The patterns, the symbols, they match advanced mathematical concepts. You gave them a foundation that they built on for thousands of years." "I gave them tools," Nari said. What they built with those tools, that was all them. Taeyang stepped closer to one particular painting. It showed Nari surrounded by children. She was smiling. One child was touching her glowing markings with obvious wonder. You cared about them. Yes, Nari said simply. That was my crime. I cared too much. J1's communication device beeped. He stepped away to take the call, but his expression darkened as he listened. When he returned, his face was grim. We need to talk, privately. They moved to the mouth of the cave. J1 spoke quietly. That was headquarters. They want Nari brought in immediately. No visit to any other sites. They've decided she's too valuable to risk giving her freedom. They promised, Taeyang said angrily. Promises can be broken, J1 said. Especially when there's advanced alien technology at stake. They want to study her, keep her contained, extract every bit of knowledge she has. Nari had been listening. Her expression was calm, but her markings were pulsing erratically. I see. I am to be a prisoner again. Different captors this time. No, Taeyang said firmly. That's not going to happen. What choice do I have? You always have a choice. Taeyang turned to J1. What happens if we don't bring her in? I lose my career. You lose yours. They send other teams to collect her by force. But we would have time to get her somewhere safe. J1 considered this. Maybe. I have a ship. Small, fast. We could reach the outer colonies before they caught up with us. No, Nari said. I will not let you destroy your lives for me. I have caused enough harm. You haven't caused harm, Taeyang said. You save people. You're still saving people. And if humanity is going to be the kind of species that imprisons refugees and breaks promises, then maybe we need someone to stand up and say no. Before Nari could respond, they heard a sound. A vehicle approaching fast. More security teams arriving. J1 checked his scanner. 3 vehicles. 20 personnel. They're not taking chances. We need to decide now, Taeyang said to Nari. Do we run or do we let them take you? Nari looked around the cave one more time. At the paintings that showed her younger self. Teaching and helping and caring. She looked at Taeyang, who was willing to give up everything for her freedom. She looked at J1, a stranger who was ready to risk his career because it was the right thing to do. Then she stepped out of the cave and walked toward the approaching vehicles. Nari, wait. Taeyang ran after her. She turned and smiled at him. I am tired of running. Tired of hiding. If your people want to judge me, let them. But I will face them on my own terms. The vehicles stopped and armed security officers emerged. But before they could approach, Nari raised her voice. I am Nari of the Luminari. I came to this place 12,000 years ago, and I broke the most sacred law of my people. I interfered with a developing species. I saved lives that my laws said should be lost to nature. Her markings blazed brighter than Taeyang had ever seen. She seemed to grow taller, more commanding. I was punished for that choice. I lost everything. And I have learned that I would make the same choice again. Because some laws are wrong. Some principles matter less than people. And compassion is not a weakness. The security officers had stopped, uncertain. A woman stepped forward from the group. Park Min-seo, the council chairperson. Nari, please come with us peacefully. We have questions. I have answered your questions, Nari said. I have cooperated with all your tests. I have been patient and polite in everything you asked. But I will not be imprisoned. Not again. Not ever again. We're not imprisoning you, Park Min-seo said. We're protecting you. By taking away my freedom? By keeping me in a facility for study? By denying me choice? Nari shook her head. That is imprisonment with a kinder name. Tae-young stepped forward to stand beside Nari. Then Jae-won joined them. Then Ji-woo. A line of humans standing with the alien, united against their own government. Park Min-seo looked at them all. You're willing to throw away your careers? Your futures? Yes, Tae-young said without hesitation. For what? For her? For what's right, Tae-young said. For the principle that no person, human or alien, should be kept against their will when they've done nothing wrong. For the idea that maybe, just maybe, we should be better than we are. There was a long silence. Then Park Min-seo did something unexpected. She smiled. Stand down, she told her security team. They looked confused but lowered their weapons. What? Tae-young said. Park Min-seo walked forward until she stood directly in front of Nari. This was a test. Not for you, Nari. For us. For humanity. To see if we would keep our word even when it wasn't convenient. To see if we would treat you with the dignity you deserve. I do not understand, Nari said. Some members of the council wanted to keep you contained. To study you like a specimen. But I disagreed. I argued that how we treat you would define what kind of species we are. Whether we're worthy of traveling the stars and meeting other civilizations. Park Min-seo held out her hand. We had to know if you would run, or if you would face us with courage. You chose courage. And your friends chose loyalty. That tells us everything we need to know. Nari stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then she took it. The council has made its decision, Park Min-seo continued. You are granted full citizenship of United Earth. You are free to live where you choose, work where you choose, and travel where you choose. We ask only one thing in return. What is that? Teach us. Not technology, not science. Teach us what you taught those ancient humans.